like to thank our sponsors for today. Without them, these events don't happen. I'd like to thank the Stefano Mogul Architects, Hinkley Allen, T.F. Moran, Allen and Major Associates, Northmark, EBI Consulting, and U.S. Pavement, our annual sponsor. Thank you all. And I'll introduce our two moderators, Jack Newby's, and now I'm going to screw it up.
Close enough, no worries.
And he is the CEO of JLN Contracting, and they're in Berlin, Connecticut. He's the principal of JLN Contracting. Jack has over 33 years in experience in general contracting, construction management, design build, retail, medical office, pre-engineered steel buildings, commercial, sports facilities, industrial refrigerated spaces, and extensive site work. In 2010, Jack formed JLN Contracting and has built the company on a strong foundation of customer satisfaction, quality, strict project controls, and strong subcontractor relationships through putting in place over $200 million in construction work. In 2018, the company expanded to Auburn, New Hampshire, and continues to grow. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Where do I send the money?
What was that?
Where do I send the money?
Oh, I'll give you an address after this.
There you go.
Actually, I'll come down and pick it up. How's that?
Very good.
And I'd like to introduce an old friend of mine. I've known Scott for quite a while. Scott Coulombe, and I still probably say his last name wrong. He's the Director of Business Development for the Northeast for JLN Contracting. And Scott started off his career in the steel industry, owning a roll-forming company that also panelized walls. I'm not sure what that means, but panelized walls, floors, and assembling steel trusses for commercial, industrial, military projects throughout the Northeast. He has also spent considerable time working on large overseas projects, building high-end residential on islands to manage the implementation of thousands of disaster relief shelters. Scott has also worked in the industrial and renewable energy space, developing projects in the water, wastewater, hydro, biogas, and general industry sections. Early this year, Scott went back to his commercial construction roots and joined JLN Contracting. Welcome, Scott. I appreciate you both doing this morning, and I turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate you doing this. And with New England Real Estate Journal, you guys always do a great job in everything that you do. So it's always great to be part of any event that you do, whether as a moderator, even though this is the first time I'm moderating with you guys, but attendees at your events are outstanding as well. We have a lot to talk about today. There's a lot to cover, a lot of different topics in various sectors of the industry. New Hampshire and northern New England, in fact, has really experienced a lot of change recently, as we know, and we'll dig into COVID, we'll dig into leases and commercial construction and just reusing of properties and so on. There's a lot to go over. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panelists on board here. We have Tom Butcher with Great New Hampshire Restaurants, also known as T-Bones, Cactus Jacks, Copper Door, and probably something else that I missed. Tom, why don't you go ahead and take a couple minutes and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. No, you got all three concepts. We started our company 35 years ago, right here in New Hampshire, and we have 5, soon to be 6 T-Bones. We're opening our 6th T-Bones next week, actually, in Concord, New Hampshire. It'll be our largest ground-up build at nearly 10,000 square feet. And then we have 2 Copper Doors. One of them's in Bedford, one's in Salem, and then we have 2 Cactus Jacks, and one in Laconia, one in Manchester. And I didn't start the company. I actually started right out of college after I got my chemistry degree as a food server at T-Bones in Hudson, and I just worked my way up, eventually becoming CEO in 2004. And then in 2007, one of the founding partners and I bought out the other two founders and retired them. And since then, we've grown the company, doubled it in size actually, and we have almost 900 employees.
Excellent, excellent. Next, we have Christian Stahlkamp with Bulios Company. Christian, if you go ahead and take a couple minutes and introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I've been practicing brokerage here in the seacoast of New Hampshire, North Shore, Mass, and into Maine for the past 13 years. And up here in this market, we're more generalists than if we were, for example, in downtown Boston, specializing in downtown retail or suburban office. And so what's nice is we're able to see the different trends. We're able to kind of parlay it into how the market flows. And especially in a time like this, it's been unique to see how some markets have kind of shut off and others have turned on. But I've lived up here in the seacoast for the past 15 years. I went to school up in Lewiston, Maine at Bates College and fell in love with New England. I'd grown up in Philadelphia and I didn't want to leave. So we moved here to Portsmouth. I have 3 daughters and a dog. So we enjoy the beach and what New Hampshire has to offer in the mountains.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, I would love to be in the Portsmouth region myself. Very nice. Our next panelist is Ed Reekskins with Northmark. He's a commercial real estate finance person. Ed, would you go ahead and share a little bit? You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Yeah,
there
okay.
You go.
I'm off now, sorry. Thank you, and thank you, Rick, for hosting this event and giving me a reason to wear a collared shirt today. I think these networking events are important in these times that we're in. So I've been in the commercial mortgage banking world for the last 30 years. Had my own company in Boston up until 2012 when we sold to Northmark. Northmark is the largest privately held mortgage banking company in the country, based out of Minneapolis. 36 offices for debt and equity, and we have 13 multifamily investment sales offices. So we're out there covering New England. I run the Boston office. Anything in the capital stack, debt, equity is kind of where we play. We do a lot of agency business. We're lenders for Fannie, Freddie, FHA. We do a lot of life insurance company lending, banking, mezzanine, debt funds, equity. So kind of the whole gambit. I'd say the timing is perfect for this panel, and that probably a largest volume of financing requests I've gotten in the last 2 or 3 weeks have all been from Southern New Hampshire, and it's a real mix. So a lot going on, and probably a good time to be doing stuff in New Hampshire.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. New Hampshire is very active in the southern part. Our next person wasn't able to be here, and if you were in the networking session, you would have heard it. But John Sokol with Hinckley Allen Attorneys, he's excused for a family health issue that he had to deal with. But it's too bad because he's a really good person to have on the panel. But we'll survive without him, and hopefully everybody will continue to put some comments in the comment section if you have any. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, we're going to switch it over to Jack Beezer to fire off the first question.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to participate. And as I was introduced, I'm typically headquartered in our Connecticut office, but Scott asked me if I wanted to participate. It sounded like a great group, so here I am. We've got a fairly diverse group of panelists, and I guess my first question is the elephant in the room. How has the COVID issue affected all of your businesses, and what kind of challenges and things you've had to overcome?
I'll be happy to go first because it's probably affected our industry more than any industry out there besides hotels. You know, it literally, you know, the 08 recession was one of those, I call it a soft landing recession. You could kind of see it coming. This was just a total cliff for us as an industry. And when we got the phone call, I literally got the phone call from Governor Sununu at 3:50 on March 16th saying, I'm going on in 10 minutes and you guys are going to get shut down at midnight. And it just floored me. I mean, we literally had to scramble to figure out what are we going to do. So we laid off out of the 700 employees. This is before we built Concord, 750. We laid off 650. that next morning, and it was really just really difficult to do. But we had to. I mean, we literally were only allowed to do takeout, and for the next 4 weeks, we were down 80% in revenue, and we were burning through about $100,000 a week in cash. And you know, restaurants typically don't have months and months of cash reserves. We fortunately had a good amount, but we had no idea. We without the PPP money that came through, you know, we're the second largest restaurant group in New Hampshire. We would have been out of business by July, out, no cash. And the PPP money saved, as you probably heard in the news, millions and millions of businesses. And in New Hampshire, it certainly saved thousands. So since then, outdoor dining has helped. Just being able to, I mean, the weather has been spectacular. Without the weather, we would have had a very difficult summer. But again, Sununu allowed us to not only have expanded outdoor dining, but we took over our parking lots and put tents up, because the COVID rules are right now, you have to have tables 6 feet apart, which again limits your indoor. So we didn't have indoor dining until the middle of May. And even though with the expanded dining, we were down still about 30%, but because of PPP, we weren't burning through as much cash. In fact, none at all. Since we opened indoor dining, our revenues are back to where they were, but it's still because we have outdoor dining. So we're actually pretty much dead even with last year, year over year. And we're now, you know, I'm getting heartburn again, because in 6 weeks we lose outdoor dining, and then what? You know, we've got challenges in front of us if the 6-foot rule continues to stay where it is.
Right. Yeah, I know it's very challenging in many industries, yet there's other sectors that are thriving as well. So, Christian, maybe you or Ed can give a little background on how things are impacting you guys and what you're seeing out there.
Sure. I guess I can jump in here. You know, when March hit, we had deals in the pipeline that immediately just tanked, and we're done. And you know, you work on these deals for 6 months, 8 months. A lot of them were close going to lease or at lease, and just like that, and you know, it's done, and you've got to refocus. And for example, I was working on a project in Stratham, 100,000 square feet for industrial space. We had saw the number of groups focused on it. We had one tenant that we were close to lease on. COVID hit, and that deal was done. Fast forward a month though, and a lot of industrial users quickly came out of the woodwork, either connected with COVID in some way, GSA contracts, but we were able to secure a great tenant. It was UPS, ended up coming in pretty hard and wanted the space, and so we were able to kind of move quickly for them to be able to get into the space and work with the town to be able to get some site modification and get them into the space. So to Tom's point, it was like coming off a cliff for a lot of businesses, and it's amazing to see how those businesses were able to cope with it and stay positive. And with that PPP money, without it, I think we'd be in a different scenario right now on this call for sure.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot about that. PPP was a lifesaver, and then the ability of everybody to really just step up and do what they needed to do, work out the details surrounding planning and zoning requirements to make things happen quickly and to adapt and to, you know, throw a life jacket out to people to keep them afloat. So that's been amazing. Some of the stories are just simply amazing, and Tom's is similar. Ed, what are you seeing out there in the world of finance with regard to how things have blown up?
Yeah, not that dissimilar to Christian in terms of the world of finance falling off the cliff in March. We were probably on track for one of our best years ever, and within a week, everything just collapsed. I think the banks just got overwhelmed with loan modification requests, with the PPP requests. So a lot of the banks just kind of pulled out of the market. We saw a lot of the life insurance companies going through modifications, Fannie and Freddie. So we really had 2 or 3 months of not doing much, but monitoring the loans that we did to see where they were tracking to. I'd say we're through a lot of that at this point, and there's still certain asset classes, retail, hospitality, they're just a big challenge right now. But I'd say for the most part, we're back, and we're probably as busy as we've ever been.
Great.
Tom, just to follow up, I'm curious how many of your employees were you able to bring back at this point? You mentioned you were right now at a break even or holding your own.
Yeah, they're all back. Every single one of them back. When we went to indoor dining the middle of June, that's when we hired them all back. When we were just outdoor dining, we hired back all the full timers, and that's literally right when we ran out of PPP money when we had the outdoor dining. So it was just lucky timing, you know. And then the part timers came back when we started indoor dining. So. And we're holding our own. I mean, we just literally did our numbers for July, and they were really good. So I'm not worried about today. I'm worried about 2 months from now.
Right. Well, there's been a lot of talk with the PPP money coming in, and you know, there's a whole process on the back end, forgiveness of the loans and whatnot. Have any of you guys seen anything related to that, the loan forgiveness process and the ups and downs of that, holding off other people for helping new projects or expanding lease spaces and et cetera? Have you seen that as a direct tie at all?
Well, I can tell you with our bank, they still do not have guidance on how this is going to be forgiven. And
Right.
And in fact, we just got a note from the National Restaurant Association. I served on their board for 15 years. They're now saying that if you own your restaurant and you also own your property, that the rents that you paid to yourself, i.e., you know, it's a separate company, the rents will not be forgivable. They just out of the blue came out and shared that, and I said, "There's just no way they can just rules like this." So that, you know, who knows? It's going to be really, really difficult to navigate because you've got, like I said, millions of companies that took this PPP money and they still don't know how it's going to work for forgiveness.
Yeah, and it's interesting because how that first came out, it was supposed to be, you know, pretty clear, cut and dry how it gets forgiven at the end. But it seems like, you know, I'm one step removed, but I'm seeing that there's a lot of back end new things added, so to speak, to make you be able to qualify for that. So yeah, it's very interesting. Tough to be in a business right now.
I'm curious, how is everybody doing paying their rents? And Christian, this probably ties into you a little bit as well. What are you seeing out there for vacancies? You hear different governors saying there's going to be rent forgiveness and that sort of thing. But what happens to the poor guy who owns the building and now can't pay his mortgage?
Right. Yeah.
And that probably ties in with your sector as well.
Everybody's all connected right at the end of it. And when we originally came out, I remember doing some Zoom calls and having the conversation of everybody's got to work together because, you know, without it, it all falls apart. And so that's where I think a lot of the loan modification came, the conversations and communications with the landlord to say, hey, how about you look at blend and extending some of this to get us through this time? So adding some term to the leases for some rent forgiveness. But right now, what's interesting, and I think it's because the PPP money is still out there. Everybody's asking about, you know, where we are in the market, and you know, do you see a collapse with rents and with sale prices? And currently, we don't see the weakness in sale pricing or leasing. But I can tell you that we've been really busy bringing on new listings, and more inventory is going to be coming on the market. So I would see a trend probably towards a decrease in those rates. And it would vary depending upon the asset class, retail versus office. But for the office, I'm here in Pease right now. It's pretty empty when I'm driving home from work and coming into work. But from what I'm hearing from the landlords is that the rents are being paid, and a lot of that I think is due to the federal and government support. And I think they see hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel, and that we'll all get through this and back into the office. And what that office looks like in 6 months or 8 months, that may be a little bit different. And we have seen tenants with leases coming due, changing what their new space is. And as an example, I'm working with a tenant that went from 20,000 square feet, and they're down to 6,000 square feet. So they're keeping a blend of at-home work and some office work. And I think we're going to see that trend continue. But we're also going to see office space in requirements for those people to expand their footprint a little bit. And so hopefully that'll negate any sort of too much downturn. So I want to look optimistically on it, but people are going to need more space if they're going to try to keep the six feet of distance.
Right. It's kind of a trade-off of a balancing, hopefully, in that sector, for sure.
Yeah, and I think in other markets, I think the Seacoast is a little bit more insulated because, we don't have 14-story buildings, maybe 3 to 4 stories of office, and you can walk up steps if you want. But in downtown Boston or downtown New York, I'm hearing a lot different story. You're already hearing about a huge decrease in rental rates. But from if you look at the numbers, to get those people, to get the building at full occupancy and those people into those buildings, it would take essentially all day if you were doing social distancing up the elevators. So I think with the Seacoast and in our market up here, it's a little bit different game plan. And I think we're all in for some changes, but I think with the Seacoast in this area, we should be okay.
Right. Yeah, the same thing with construction sites. The larger construction sites in Boston, I've been hearing about, folks having to take, hours literally to get guys up to the right floors and start the work. And, there's an entire process even down on the ground level of what's happening there in order to be able to stage and have social distancing appropriately and keep all the employees safe, just getting in the process to get up the elevator, never mind once they're doing the work itself. So, we're talking about modifying leases and making adjustments to be able to continue doing business, but, those are kind of the paper things. What are you seeing out there with regards to physical changes to buildings, and whether it's, in Tom's case, he might be doing, sneeze guards or, separations between the different booths and so on, but there could be also physical structural changes within the buildings and on the exteriors. What are you guys seeing out there in that regard?
I mean, we're lobbying very hard with the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association to allow for, as you indicated, not sneeze guards, but what we call barriers. So they're on casters, so you can move them around and put them in between bar seats. I was sharing earlier that you have to have 6 feet between a bar seat. If you come in with your wife, there needs to be 6 feet between you and your wife and then the next couple. Well, if someone comes in, if Scott just comes in and he's by himself and sits at the bar, he now just chewed up 6 feet on either side. So that becomes a real challenge for us, that, our bars have been cut virtually in half as far as occupancy. So we're trying to get them to agree that a barrier is a perfect solution. And if you think about it logically, it's a 6 feet distance, but if I'm sitting in a booth, and we've done this in our restaurants, and we put these barriers that go up about 3 feet behind you, I can sit here and someone can sit right behind me in a booth, and we're not facing each other. So it's logically it's safe. It's not 6 feet, but it is. If you draw a line from this person's face to that person's face, it's going to be 6 feet. So that's how we're trying to approach it, and we haven't really heard much yet from the state on that. There is, like I said, we're just starting that process to kind of educate them about how that works. And I will say that the restaurants that, like ours, we can't physically change it without substantial investment to do, say, like a drive-through, or we are going to take a look at maybe cutting out some windows so that you can walk up and get your takeout order, but you can stay outside. That is one option we're looking at to do. And actually, I got the idea because I think Texas Roadhouse is doing just that.
Oh, great. Well, if I was at a bar by myself, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble in your scenario earlier. But anyway, don't forget everybody that's on the panel, and I mean that's in the audience here. If you want, you can also use the chat session on the side and throw out any questions that you'd like us to ask as well, and we can continue on from there.
You know, I want to comment also. I think it was Ed that said, you know, New Hampshire's is in a good space right now. It seems to be a lot of action, and there is. I mean, we're very fortunate that we're not in a big city. Big cities are going to change forever. I mean, I have a friend that lives in New York City, and he says he's not living there now. I mean, he's not going back. He's selling his apartment and he's moving to Southern New Hampshire. And we're seeing that a lot in the residential space. People are moving out of the cities, coming to New Hampshire, buying up beautiful lake homes, and you know, it's boding really well for the southern, at least southern New Hampshire, and even, you know, in the Lakes region and over on the seacoast. And you got giant projects like Tuscan Village down in Salem. There's some good projects going on. There's another one in Londonderry too that I think New Hampshire is going to be in great shape over the next 10 years once we get out of this.
Yeah, to Tom's point, you know, we are seeing, and I put some deals under contract for ground up, and that's ground up across for retail that you wouldn't think that you would see in this environment. And I think that a lot of people are bullish with this community and the surroundings, and also if you think about it, if you're putting land under agreement, it's going to take a process to go through the permits and approvals, let alone the construction of the building. So if you're thinking about it, you're almost like a year out. So hopefully, you know, these retailers and the ones that are looking at doing these ground up projects are doing well in the COVID era, that they'll come through it, get their facilities up, and things will be fine.
Right, and things have changed definitely, not only from the health aspect of our lives, but also just how we're doing business and how we're getting our goods and services, frankly. You know, we're starting to see a huge boom in the online retailers, not only the Amazon and the Walmarts of the world, but other retailers and even the mom and pops are switching to doing a lot more online stuff, which is, we're seeing a lot of warehousing opportunities coming up. You know, there's a big project down in Hudson, New Hampshire that's planned for an Amazon. It's the 2.5 million square foot facility that's in the permitting process, and they're taking over literally a golf course along the river to put this facility and to have the appropriate setbacks. There's another project in Kingston, New Hampshire. I'm not sure who the occupant is going to be on that, but that's 800,000 square feet. And I just read about a new facility at the Manchester Airport that came on that's available for warehousing. It's like 750,000 square feet. You know, this is Southern New Hampshire we're talking about, and that kind of square footage is simply shocking to come into the space. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting in our market, seeing 100,000 or 200,000 square foot industrial user, you would only see maybe a handful of them coming into our market a year, and a lot of them were kicking tires. They weren't doing deals, where the bread and butter for our Seacoast market and New Hampshire market would be that 50,000 square foot industrial user. But it's amazing to see how many large industrial users are out there looking for space, actively wanting to find locations to expand their business. It's either manufacturing that they need the space for to increase, to be able to support the sales, or their supply chains got gorked up and they need additional warehouse space. So that has been a huge demand right now. That building I mentioned in Stratham, New Hampshire, 100,000 square feet, there's probably about a dozen groups that came out after COVID wanting to look into a space like that and to secure it. So it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting market out there right now.
Just to add on to what Christian said, from a financing perspective, probably the most sought after asset class for our lenders right now is still multifamily, but they love industrial. And I think that's probably got the least amount of vacancy. And I don't mean just tilt up 30-foot clear height stuff. I mean, functionally obsolescent, 14-foot flex, older stuff. Lenders are very much going after that asset class right now. So I think it's a good time. I'm seeing a lot more requests too for financing that's industrial, kind of as we talked about. That's kind of right on the border of Massachusetts. I think that's where we will see it. Tax-free New Hampshire, some of those jobs kind of just pushing out, people moving up that way. I think it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree. New Hampshire and Maine have a lot to win, I think, in this. And we recently just did a couple big industrial deals with Abbott Labs. They're increasing their footprint substantially up in Maine, and with that comes jobs, which I think is great at the end of the day. And hopefully, those that are out of jobs now can look to reposition themselves or to, gain traction in a different industry.
Yep. Excellent.
So do you think, I'm sorry, Scott?
No, go ahead, Jack.
Do you think money will still be available here in the long term based on what the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the lenders, as they're getting through this PPP stuff, I think there's still some banks that were very affected by the hospitality industry, and they're going to be licking their wounds for a while. What we're seeing now is probably more of the local community banks and credit unions getting very active that previously had lost some of that business to some of the larger, more regional banks. So we're doing a lot of business with kind of the smaller banks. Life insurance companies still very active. They want to grow their portfolios here in New England. They've historically lost a lot of business to the local banks, but now there's an opening for them to get in. So I think there's a lot of capital out there looking for the right deals right now.
Got it. Well, in order to utilize some of these spaces that you're talking about, and with fitting up existing buildings and utilizing them differently, are you running into any issues with the permitting process slowing down deals, or do you think they're coming through and really going the extra mile to try to help make things work?
I think there's just natural holdups by not getting people together and having to do Zoom meetings for entitlements and whatnot. And, we've had some delays with, appraisals, things like that, getting people.
The usual stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, it's nothing of consequence. So I don't think that should hold things up.
Right. Well, there's a big question out there right now because all the planning and zoning boards have their meetings online now, and that was a big change, and there was a lot of uncertainty in how that would all work. But right now, it seems like it's been working great, and things have been happening a lot faster, and so on. The big question out there now is, do we continue having these planning and zoning board meetings online and in person, if people so choose to do so, because it makes it much more accessible to other people outside the area and so on. So I'll open up to the whole panel. What do you guys think about that? Should they continue on or not? And how do you think that'll impact construction projects and new developments?
I'd like to see it continue. I think you get more participation in it as well, like to your point, and having a couple projects go through that initial Zoom period it was a little challenging, but seeing a couple further meetings and being a part of a couple further meetings down the road is everybody's kind of got their stride now, and people are a little bit more to the point, hopefully, and as they want the meeting to roll. So hopefully we'll see it to continue.
Right. We've been seeing some of these changes that you're talking about, fitting out existing buildings and so on. And one thing that I've seen that was a big change that I noticed was that people are taking the exterior of buildings and making accessibility into their individual storefronts that way, instead of through the mall corridors. Corridors that typically have hundreds, if not thousands, of people in them. I've noticed in one of the news articles that I read that they're doing that and repurposing malls into areas that you wouldn't think that necessarily would make sense, but they are. They're doing these things to survive. What are your thoughts on doing that with not only malls but other facilities like even mill buildings and so on, where everybody is concentrated into a typical main entrance?
Right. Tom, would you ever go into a mall at this point if you had the opportunity?
No.
Yeah.
Even before all this, I mean, they're just a dying breed. I mean,
Yeah.
I think when we previously talked, they're starting to turn them into, repurpose them into warehouse space. I mean, they're just not going to survive. I mean, the Mall of New Hampshire it's just, they just opened, and I don't know how they're going to survive, but Dave and Buster's just opened last week. The occupancy of that, I forget how many square feet it is. I think it's 40,000 square feet or something, but, and they can have as many as 1,784 customers at a time. I just don't see how that model can work.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge with the malls. We're working on some leasing projects that abut a mall, and we're really in discussions in terms of trying to figure out how to reposition that property. And to Scott's point, zoning is a challenge. The one initial thought is similar to like a Waterstone, is to do a multi-use with residential, but a lot of the zoning doesn't allow for that. So right now, it's that property is really in limbo. In other communities and towns, we, as I mentioned, our office is up in Portland and covers all of Maine. And we worked on a project up in Lewiston, was a former Bradley's, 260,000 square feet. What do you do with that? And this group came in and converted it to industrial. And it took about a year, but it's 100% occupied. There are some challenges to it. But if you think about the benefits, one, you've got the repositioning of the industrial building, but you also have these huge parking lots. So from there's additional buildable square footage in those parking lots. The challenge is just to point out, a lot of it was reconfiguring the loading docks, and then another big thing was slab thickness. So heavy manufacturers really couldn't go into a facility like that. But the thought was, you've got this huge parking lot that you could do a build-to-suit for, to be able to accommodate those types of users. So,
Christian, in that case, was that a fit up for one individual tenant or owner, or was that split up into several smaller industrial spaces?
yeah, multi-tenant.
Okay.
So that's surprising, and and that's where I think here down in the Seacoast, that with that mall, highest and best would probably be multifamily versus industrial, but who knows? But that was a big challenge too, making sure that the zoning was in line. And if the community is excited for that type of use, I think you could get some change. But if not, that community or town will probably see an increase in their taxes, because these companies or landlords that are paying the tax, they're not too excited about that anymore when there's no tenant. And what's the real value of that building? I've read some articles and Walmarts that go dark, and trying to figure out what that true assessment is on the property. So if towns don't try to figure out something creatively, then they're going to lose some serious tax revenue.
Well, and that's just it. A commercial property is only worth what it can produce in cash flow, or produce as a profitable business. We bought the old Shorties on 101 a year and a half ago. It's still dark right now, and certainly it's going to stay dark for another year. And we're going to the town for an abatement, because it's not worth anything right now sitting there dark. And so I think individual municipalities are going to have to play ball, rezoning some things, or they're just going to lose big time on the tax revenue, and it's going to fall on the homeowners, and they're not going to be happy about it.
Yeah, I agree. And in the event of a reset of rental rates too, you're going to have to see that on the tax side. Commercial's typically has been slower to go up versus residential, but Newington is the perfect example. I mean, the mall is a huge percentage of their taxes and their income for that town. So without that, that's a big gap.
Mm.
And Christian, are you finding that the towns and the cities' governments are, in fact, working in cooperation on changing zoning and relaxing rules? And I won't say relaxing rules, but actually making zone changes and to accommodate these new developments?
Yeah, I think so. I think another big thing about in outside of maybe the commercial sector, but is affordable housing in New Hampshire, and specifically in the Seacoast. How do you find housing for all these people that you have these for a time, you have these restaurants, where are people going to live? So I think that's a big challenge right now for communities, and I think they see it, but they need to figure out a creative solution to that problem.
And that's a real hot button right now in, like you said, on the Seacoast, Bedford, an affluent community, Wyndham, Londonderry, and you've got all these services that require employees that are younger, and they can't afford a $400,000 house. So we're actually in the middle of developing more workforce housing. We're very, very light in Southern New Hampshire for workforce housing. And the problem is people, the NIMBYs, they don't want it in their backyard, but they still want their Starbucks and they still want their Target and they want their restaurants. They're going to have to start, and then they need to be educated and understand what workforce housing is. There are groups out there that try and pitch it as Section 8 housing, it is completely not anywhere near that. It's affordable housing for people that are starting out in life, and it's the apartments that are being built for workforce housing are identical for the people that make above, I think the threshold is 44,500. They're the same apartment. It's just you get a reduction in payment based on your income.
Yes, it's a challenge for that to happen too in the Seacoast because of the land costs.
Yes.
To build that affordable housing. Some, this was pre-COVID, but some of the restaurateurs in this area actually, were buying multifamilies and putting employees in there to help with being able to actually fill their restaurants with employees. I mean, it's definitely an issue that will continue, and hopefully communities start to focus on.
It seems like on that Seacoast area, Christian, a lot of that construction is pushing up further towards Rochester, as I'm seeing deals.
Yeah, Dover is on fire right now. It's just absolutely on fire. And we're seeing a lot of ground up developments coming online for apartments and affordable housing. And, that's the transition, and then probably up to Rochester as well.
Yeah. I'd say out of the requests we've had in the last couple of weeks, at least 3 or 4 of them have been ground up multifamily. So I think people are in tune with that right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And Scott, you guys may have more connection with this in terms of construction pricing, if that's gone down and how that's going to, affect, with COVID. But that's been a challenge with some of these markets is, being able to get the rents based on the new construction, and that's same for across the board. That's for industrial as well. Rent.
Yeah. For the most part, I think construction has been really strong. We were deemed an essential service back when things were shut down for COVID, and really kept continuing to build along. Obviously, the construction project is not something you can just decide to do or not do overnight. It takes, months and months and sometimes years and years. It's not like a restaurateur could say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump and put a building on the ground tomorrow and get started right away. So basically, I think what's happened is we had the slowdown, but construction kept on chugging along. And then now that we're kind of coming out of it, construction's picking up its red hot pace that it was before when COVID hit. So I don't see any major relaxation in the pricing, at least, broad brush strokes anyway. But there's certain sectors, as we discussed earlier, the hospitality sector, the restaurant sector, and others are hurting a little more, obviously. But on the other sectors, such as industrial, like we mentioned, is heating red hot, and it's hard to keep up with the amount that's needed in that sector.
Yeah.
Talking back about the workforce housing and providing a lower cost or more affordable housing options out there. I wonder if there's any options for converting the mall spaces into more of housing units, and whether it's for workforce or even seniors and so on. They're more centralized locations, like you mentioned. There's a lot of parking and so on, but we've got a major hurdle to get over with regards to zoning and planning, and then the whole dynamic change associated there, and still be, quote unquote, social distancing and keeping everyone apart. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
Just in general, I think it's probably a good idea to explore. I mean, if there's a need for the multifamily housing and retail is just not there anymore, I don't know why it wouldn't be a good alternative use. Self-storage, industrial, any of that stuff, I think would be a good readaptive use for those malls.
Yeah, some of the challenges on the conversion of it is, if you remember walking through those buildings, it's cavernous. You get lost in there. I don't know if that's by design, like a casino, but you're walking through like a Macy's, and you're like, how do I get out of here?
Right.
prevents a challenge too, though, in terms of how do you build these units because they're so deep. So you almost, you got to scrape them and start over and go up to, increase the density.
Yeah, I would agree. As a follow-up to that, it would have to be some major construction and redesign and repurposing. But you've been in this world for a long time. What people can do to old buildings, it's the space, it's the geographic location. They're centralized. They're not typically abutting, a residential neighborhood, where they're really impacting people there. You have some options with that kind of land that's available. Good. I'm not seeing any comments coming in the chat session, but we're close to wrapping up here. If you have any questions that you'd like to see asked, go ahead and throw them in the chat section, and we could try to do that as well. And that will continue on in our discussions.
Hey, Tom, are you hearing anything on ghost kitchens at all from those you know in the neighborhood?
Yeah, funny you should bring that up. That was something that I had been looking at pre-COVID, and we actually started our own ghost kitchen. We have, so for those of you who don't know what a ghost kitchen is, they started in the cities a few years ago, and they've exploded through this COVID situation in the big cities. And the reason is rents for restaurants in the big cities are incredibly high, and it just chews into their bottom line big time. So some of these chefs said, you know what? I don't need a high profile location with a lot of eyeballs and people walking by. I'm going to go buy something in a low rent area and build a commercial kitchen and make food and have it delivered. And it works. And so what we have is we have a 15,000 square foot commissary in downtown, it's not quite downtown Manchester, but it's not in a great part of Manchester, I can tell you that. But we bought the building for a song, and that was about 6 years ago. And we butcher all of our own steaks and bake all of our desserts, and we do a lot of prep for the restaurants and then deliver it out 6 days a week. We've got about 15 employees that work there. And so we've got a giant commercial kitchen. So we started a ghost kitchen. It's called dingdongdeliver.com. And the model is you can go on there and you can buy, for example, you can buy a chicken pot pie, and it comes with salad and corn on the cob and things like that. And it gets delivered to your home. You pick the day. It's either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. It's delivered to your home in a cooler. You don't have to be home, so it's contactless. And you either reheat it or you cook it. So we've got other items that you can cook. So and the reason why it's 3 times as more profitable as a restaurant. We have virtually no rent. We have no front of the house staff. We have no management. So you've wiped out a good chunk of expenses. And again we repurposed that building to help all the restaurants and started to do this. I think we're the only ones in New Hampshire that are doing it right now. It would be pretty difficult to do it the way they do it in the big cities because there just isn't the population.
Right. It's interesting to see. That sounds amazing. It's a great idea.
Tom, how is it delivered? You have your own delivery people?
Yep. We have our own logoed van, and then it doesn't need to be refrigerated because it's got coolers. But we have a fleet of refrigerated vans that drive around to the restaurants to drop off product. And we also have that option for people that live in Salem. If they want to buy a Ding Dong Deliver meal kit, they can have it delivered to Salem T-Bones and pick it up themselves, which we just started. So it's greatly expanded the customer base for us.
So are you actually delivering to individual homes as well?
Yes, in Bedford and Manchester, yep.
Got it.
Are you seeing a big increase in that, and are you going to try to grow that side of the business?
We are, yeah. I mean, we actually, it's growing, and we're going to continue to throw some money at it. We started this 8 weeks ago, and sales have slowly grown, but we haven't put any marketing dollars behind it yet. It's just been word of mouth and within the restaurants. So we're going to start throwing some money at it and see if we can get some movement.
Now, with that service, are you able to have a similar service with providing alcohol as well, to maybe cater to some of those folks that are in the bar scene that are not able to go to the bars anymore?
And that's something we're working on this with the state with, because it's, the liquor laws are very, very just difficult to work with. But it is, you have to have a catering license, which we do, but the way it works is you have to call the state every time that you want to pull your liquor license for catering. So we'd have to do it every single time the day before. It's just very cumbersome. So we're trying to get them to understand that we're bringing food, we're going to card the person. We can actually do it right now out of the restaurants. They changed the rule brief during this COVID time, where you can come and order takeout and you can order beer and wine to go. So we're trying to explain to them that there's nothing different than the restaurant doing it. We're just adding a delivery piece to it, and we're still going to card. So we're working through that process.
Now, I always like to finish this up by asking everyone if they have to say one positive thing about what's going on or what they see going forward, what would that be? It might take you all a couple of seconds, but some of you might know right off the top of your head.
Well, I think I could speak to that a little bit. It's very interesting just to hear the innovation that we're seeing in people adapting and trying to figure out different ways to cope with these things. I'm hearing a lot of good ideas in different aspects.
I guess I would say when I'm out there talking to different businesses and industries, communication has just been clutch in terms of being able to successfully navigate this pandemic. And those that communicate well and those that work well with others are positive. They're moving forward. And those that are taking a different tact on things, they put the barriers up, put the attorneys on things. John's not here, so I can't defend himself, but that's when things implode. And I think what I've seen, the deals that work through COVID is communication, and that's what's been really nice to see. And there's been some challenging deals, and through communication we've been able to really get through it. So that's my thought.
I'll say that it's been incredibly encouraging to me that all of our business partners, from our main food provider to our small bank relationship with Primary Bank, to that's my bulldog, to just, they've all stepped up and have really put together like great pricing, just very helpful in so many ways, and like never before. It's like they just appreciate our relationship more than ever during this.
And your dog agrees.
I would have to say, it's been interesting to see with slowing everything down and certain things being shut down, you really could kind of step back and realize what's really important. So, granted, we couldn't do a bunch of things for a while, but at the end of the day, we found ourselves at least sitting home and going, wow, we don't have all these distractions, and we're not running, 15, 18 hours a day just trying to keep up. So as we come back online, we're kind of realigning ourselves and trying to make sure that we're staying in line with those things, still do the things that we truly enjoy doing, but maybe cut down on the busyness.
And Ed, your business is the one that makes everything spin.
I was going to say this, a little self-serving, but I'm very optimistic about the amount of capital that's still out there to do deals. A lot of our clients are very innovative, and they want to be out there. There's a lot of equity on the sidelines looking for investment. There's some great capital sources out there right now. Rates we think are going to be low for a long period of time. So I'm in the very optimistic corner right now.
That's all great news. I want to thank you all for doing this today. I do appreciate all the information. I'm sure people that have attended also, and this will be recorded, so if people missed it, they have the opportunity to watch it on the New England Real Estate Journal website or our YouTube channel. I want to thank our sponsors for today, Stefano Mogul Architects, Hinkley Allen, TF Moran, Allen and Major Associates, Northmark, EBI Consulting, and US Pavement. I also would like anyone that's watching and anyone that will view this afterwards, visit any one of Tom's restaurants. We want to support all of us, all of our different businesses, but, Tom is actually in one of the industries that is getting hit the worst, probably. So, hey, Tom, could you just mention some of the restaurants again?
Yeah, it's T-Bone's Great American Eatery, Copper Door, and Cactus Jack's. And we're located all in southern New Hampshire, Salem, Hudson, Bedford, Derry. We do have a new one, like I said, opening in Concord, and then we've got Laconia as well.
I'm even going to take a trip up there and I'm going to eat in one of the restaurants. How's that, Tom?
That sounds terrific. I really appreciate that.
Hey, I want to thank Scott and Jack. We appreciate doing the interview, the moderating today. And I want to thank, I want to thank the rest of you for participating. I want to wish everyone a safe and happy Labor Day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there you go. These are the dates of the upcoming webinars. September 15th, Women in Commercial Real Estate, September 16th, 22nd, and 29th, New York State of the Market, Long Island, New York City, upstate New York, September 17th, Metro South of Boston. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, who is Dave Gambasini, and he is with Excel Capital Partners. Dave is a principal at Excel Capital Partners, based in Bedford, New Hampshire. It focuses on identifying and securing equity and non-traditional debt from $5 million to $50 million for commercial real estate developments throughout the Northeast and across the U.S. Excel Capital Partners provides acquisitions and disposition advisory services for investors, family offices, high net worth individuals, developers, owners, and operators, helping them invest, monetize, and succeed with their developments and investment goals. Dave is also president of CCIM New England, right? Correct.
Yep, New England chapter.
And I give you Dave Gambasini.
Excellent, thank you. I appreciate all that, Rick. And to everyone that's joined us, we obviously had a little bit of opportunity to network here, but thank you all for joining us. We've got a great panel of well-regarded experts in their fields who want to help share some ideas and concepts as we're kind of looking through the world and our industry with a new pair of lenses. And in general, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for giving us a little bit of time to kind of share some ideas with you. The topic today is construction, design, engineering, and adapting to the new normal. And we were kind of saying a little earlier, Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and COVID fatigue has become kind of a thing too. So we don't really want to focus on doom and gloom, but there's no doubt that our industry has changed. Every aspect of it has changed, and our panelists want to help us understand, what's changed in their specific field and how they've found these changes and where they've capitalized on some of these changes. Really, what the takeaway would be is to help us as an audience understand how to capitalize on these changes with the help to be able to bring this to our clients, to some of our users, and maybe some of our own projects. So, with that, I'd like to get to some introductions on my end. As Rick said, thank you for that, Rick. I'm Dave Gambasini, president of the New England CCIM chapter and principal with Excel Capital Partners. I'm in Bedford, New Hampshire, and as he said, we do private equity and non-traditional debt for commercial developments throughout the Northeast and up and down the East Coast. So with us today, we have Greg Stewart with Jewett Construction. Greg Stewart is the Senior Vice President of Jewett Construction. Jewett Construction is a family-owned construction management company based in Raymond, New Hampshire, with an office in Scarborough, Maine. And they have a 48-year history in New England, so their roots are pretty solid around here, if you've known of them. As a senior vice president, Greg is responsible for Jewett Construction's growing project portfolio. Greg, thanks for joining us today. Anything else you'd like to add as far as you and or Jewett?
Thanks for having us, Dave. Really excited to be part of the panel and looking forward to a real positive and forward-looking discussion today.
Great, thank you, Greg. Lisa DiStefano. Lisa is a principal with DiStefano Magel Architects, and she has dedicated her professional career to the thoughtful planning of projects in the state of New Hampshire and the surrounding region. Lisa is known for her superb design skills and the ability to effectively communicate with all stakeholders on a project, and her dedication to advocacy for her clients. Lisa is a LEED certified and registered architect in New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Lisa, thank you for joining us. Anything else regarding yourself and or DiStefano Magel?
Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for the opportunity today. With the invite that came from Rick, I was really excited to see the opportunity to be with Greg and Bob because we've had numerous projects together. So I'm hoping that in working together with the presentation today, we can really show how a great team can help a project move forward and how we all work together as advocates for our clients.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, good. I think like anything in it, and I think it'll be a common theme, is collaboration right now between our groups is paramount. You know, the more challenges that we've been faced with, the more important it is to have advocates for your clients. So that's great. And Robert Duvall, TF Moran. Bob is president and chief engineer at TF Moran Incorporated, a multidisciplinary engineering firm offering civil, structural, traffic engineering, landscape architecture, and land surveying services. Bob has over 40 years of design and construction experience with industrial, commercial, and residential projects in the private and public sectors. Bob is an accredited LEED professional and professional engineer licensed in New Hampshire and several other states. Bob, thank you for your time today and joining us. Anything else you can share about yourself and or TF Moran?
Well, thank you, David, and I'm looking forward to getting the discussion started here.
Excellent. So why don't we dive right into it? We've seen a lot of changes. Obviously, like I said, we're all trying to adapt to this and understand how to move forward. Lisa, I want to start with you. You know, we've had some conversations leading up to this, and there's a lot of changes, and a lot of it starts with, you know, the project ideas and where people are going to go. Where do they start and how do they get going in their projects in this climate? What are you seeing in the field of architecture? What do you see that's different and or changing?
Well, you know, the thing with the pandemic is it's all about space and spatial relationships. So I think what we're finding in the field of architecture is that we're problem solvers as well as creators. So it's bringing us back to the very basics of digging deep to really understand the situations at hand and thinking in ways that, as we had mentioned, in a collaborative way, working with our consultants and experts to see what we can all do together to bring forward new opportunities for our clients. You know, and thinking about where we are now and how architecture can change our environments in ways, you know, in the 20s when TB was, you know, the pandemic that was hitting, you know, the world, there were changes that were made in architecture at the time where we were looking at light and bright spaces and materials that were easy to clean and bringing daylight in. And so those changes shifted how architecture moved along, and they become standards for us moving forward. So, you know, looking at opportunities now where we may be designing and these may become those standards of the future. And so one of the people earlier on in our half hour of networking talked about doing a lot of reading and investigation. And we're finding that in our firm now. And we have opportunities when we all get together in calls just like this and talk about, you know, what are those things that we are learning, but also reaching out to people like Greg and Bob to find out what's happening specifically with their experience in their industries to move things in a positive direction.
Right. And Bob, you guys do a lot. TF Moran does a lot of design of public spaces. And we certainly understand, and we'll probably get to building and in interiors, but as it relates to what Lisa was saying in the evolution of architecture, where do you see this and how do you see this evolving for public spaces? You know, whether it's parks, patios, or how can you take us into that a little bit?
Well, it's definitely an evolving issue here. There's been no, I would say, industry guidelines or guidance specifically to how to deal with public spaces and the COVID pandemic. So we're kind of having to figure it out as we go along, trying to integrate, 6-foot distancing and smaller groups and designing these public spaces to separate people where previously we were designing to bring people together. So it's a different way of looking at things. And I'm sure Lisa's having to do the same thing inside the building that we're having to do outside the building. And so far where I've seen the biggest impact is on designing outside patio space for restaurants. And, it was, I would say it was a minority of restaurants that were interested in that in the past. And now it seems that everybody wants it and they want a much bigger capacity for that outdoor seating. And you can see existing restaurants experimenting with everything with, from Jersey barriers and parking lots to, to fancy tents that are practically buildings in themselves. So I can't say that a final word has been written on how best to do that. I think it's just a case-by-case basis at this point, but it's very important to have that discussion with your client and with your team, your design team, to make sure that you're consistent in your approach inside and outside the building, and recognize that everybody, at least in the food industry, and probably that's going to spill into other types of buildings as well, is looking for a more robust outside space, and understanding that and working with your client on that.
Sure, thanks. And Greg, on the construction side, and this also kind of spins off a little bit of what Lisa was saying, on the construction side, are you seeing many changes in the construction regarding materials? Are you guys dealing with those materials that folks are asking for, easier to clean, pressure washing? I mean, what are you seeing on the construction side, either in materials or in general, based on the kind of where we're going with this?
I think as it relates to the materials, I think the biggest change right now is the availability or lack thereof of building materials with everything going on. So that's probably the biggest struggle. I think to Bob's point about the lack of clarity, I think this thing is evolving daily. And I think that communication and the collaboration and ability to move swift, time is of the essence for a lot of these businesses. So, use the example of a restaurant patio, having the ability to work with the team through the design, budget, and the approvals, and then execute swiftly for those business owners that need that time to, get things moving back for their business and stay alive to this thing. So I think the collaboration, working with the team that you trust, and open lines of communication with the ability to be flexible and understand that this thing's going to change at a moment's notice. And it's not a whole lot different than pre-pandemic and what a successful construction project is. It's collaboration, planning, execution, and the ability to move swiftly and provide your clients certainty of outcome. So I'd say that approaching it the same way that we would approach any project, with a mind towards, hey, this outside thing is impacting how we conduct it on a general basis, That's the key in my mind.
Yeah, and
If
we're,
I could
Yeah.
jump onto that, sorry to interrupt. Greg brought up a good point that reinforces this, the need for the collaboration. You know, we've done a lot of design build projects with Jewett, and the benefit of having Greg and his team involved in doing this cost estimating that is changing ever quickly affects how Bob and I, you know, and our teams design. And so, you know, we can have conversations with Greg and his team almost weekly and find out what is happening with their experience in buying materials, which will affect how we might design certain things for our clients. So to Greg's point, we did that before, and we're probably even more connected now as we're moving projects along. And there are two on the boards right at this present time with Jewett, and it really goes to you know, solving the needs of the client for sure, but part of the needs always have to do with budget, and then you know, the timing. How quickly can they get some of those materials to satisfy the needs of the client?
sure, and we all work with clients who have varying levels of experience, right? So we know when we're getting into projects, if you're dealing with a client that's experienced, has done it before, knows what they're doing, versus clients that have less experience, just as much capability, but just less experience. How are you guys collectively, you know, anyone can take this, how are you guys handling this process? Okay, meaning, let's say it's someone with less experience who is just coming to market saying, here's my great project and I want to hit the ground running. Are you guys presenting yourselves as a collective, cohesive group saying, hey, listen, I work closely with Jewett and I want to get them in early, and you know, if you either you know that they're part of the group or you want to try to bring them in, are you guys trying to facilitate that collaboration more so or earlier? And or the flip side of that, are you seeing clients coming to you saying, how can I get this project streamlined? Can you help me with that? In other words, are the clients seeing that side of it as you guys are? You guys are seeing the need for a real strategic collaboration to get things done. Are the clients seeing that, or do you find that you're educating the clients on that?
It's a little bit of both. We've been doing design build projects with Jewett and Lisa, for that matter, going back at least 30 years in Jewett's case. And I've always been impressed with that process. So any opportunity I have at the earliest stages of a project, I will put the bug in the client's ear that if they get their builder and their architect and their engineers working together at the outset, the whole process is going to go more smoothly. And there's different ways of delivering that between CM and whatever. But if they get the team together early, whether they end up going design builder or not, they're going to get the best product in the shortest amount of time and with the least headaches. So I've always been advancing that. I don't know that there's been a change in procurement related to the pandemic necessarily, and maybe time will tell if it does play a role. But just in general, I think that's the best approach to a project. And in the COVID notwithstanding, there has been a trend over the last 5 years at least towards accelerating project delivery. And that just makes that collaborative approach that much more important. I would say that the client who is not taking that collaborative approach is taking on himself a risk of a delayed project delivery, whether he realizes it or not.
Yeah, I think trying to think of a client that we've built a complex building for that wasn't incredibly busy running their business on their end. The people that we build for, Lisa, Bob, myself, they are running a business, and it could be in a wide range of industries, but they're always business owners and busy. So having that, the constant line of communication takes that burden and that responsibility away from the client so that they can focus on what they do best, whichever industry or business they run, and allow us to really streamline the process with the involvement of that owner at various levels. Some clients want to be very, very involved in every detail, and some say, hey, these are my 5 things, come back to me here with a great design, Lisa. And I think that speed has always been there. And I think just working with people that you trust is the most important thing.
Yeah, and it becomes a more enjoyable process when we're all working together. And, you know, the design, bid, build can have its challenges. And when we're all working together with the owner and we all have the same end goal and we're all vested early on, you know, not to say that there won't be challenges, because, you know, there always will be some, but, you know, to have that team to work with and have that camaraderie and be celebrating at the end with a successful project, it's a great feeling. And I would say that the projects that we've all worked on together have proven to be the case.
Sure. And in this same vein, and the idea that obviously you're trying to bring this focus to the client early so they can have a successful completion and a successful project. The timing of that isn't always in your control, right? There's a lot that happens, and I'm sure there's been different challenges now regarding regulatory changes and you know, approvals and permitting. Bob, once again, I refer to you. Just, you know, I have more experience with TF Moran than the other groups, but I know you guys do a lot with on that side of things for permitting purposes. What are you seeing on the regulatory side? Have you seen challenges with getting projects to stay on time targets based on the challenges with approvals and any changes in regulations?
Well, we have. Unfortunately, we are seeing things taking longer. And I think a big part of that is due to the lack of in-person meetings at the regulatory agencies. You know, they're doing everything by Zoom too, and they're, you know, they have skeleton staffs typically in their offices. A lot of people are working from home. And, you know, I don't know how to say this, but I think public sector employees find that when they're at home, in particular, I think they find it a lot harder to pay attention to business, and it's taking longer to get answers to questions. It's taking longer to get feedback. Actually, it's maybe a little easier to schedule meetings than it had been in the past when you're not doing it face to face, but I'm finding it's taking more and more meetings to get something done, and this is in the background of more strict regulations in the first place. And we're seeing this across the board, and not just state agencies, but local communities, public works reviews, and, you know, fire department reviews, police reviews, and so forth. We're seeing that there's increasing complexity that they're expecting of projects, and a lot less flexibility too. There's a younger generation, I guess, that you know, the older generation that's now retiring or recently retired. You know, they learned their business as regulators in a much more informal environment. You know, everything was not spelled out cookbook style with you know, a rule for everything and an answer for everything. So there was a lot more common sense and a lot of things that fell between the cracks, and a lot more flexibility, where we're finding now that the newer reviewers, the younger reviewers, they just essentially are reading the book and they're reciting back to you the regulation, and they're having a hard time when you say, well, this doesn't really apply in this case because of these, you know, extraneous circumstances, and they just they're almost at a loss. So it takes a longer time to work through the regulatory process. And for those two reasons. One, it's just harder to get people to focus long enough to make a decision. The regulations are more complex. There's less flexibility. And at the risk of droning on a little bit here, the other thing that's different with respect to COVID is the public hearings that towns are doing, planning board hearings, conservation commissions, et cetera, now being done on the Zoom platform, as well as introducing some interesting factors. I can't say it's all bad. The first few meetings we had were disasters because the people who were running the meetings, didn't really know what they were doing at the outset. They were just, assistant planners or whatever, and didn't really know how to run the meetings. And so it was taking forever to get people able to talk to one another. Trying to put a plan up on the screen was an ordeal, and and getting someone to zoom in on the lower left corner, would take 10 minutes and that sort of thing. Those problems seem to have sorted themselves out to some extent. Some towns are better at it than others. So that part has been negative. And I still find it very difficult because towns are very reluctant to give up control of those platforms. Whereas when you're used to an in-face meeting in the town hall or whatever, you control your presentation. You could show the picture you wanted to show, whether it's on screen or on a board. You could point to something. You could, go back a few slides or a few boards, and you had a much better control over the coherency of your presentation. But now, in many towns, maybe even most, you have to submit your slides ahead of time. You have to follow the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you ever want to refer back to one, again, it might take 10 minutes for them to find it. So that's hurtful a little bit. But on the positive side, and I throw this out as a personal observation, and I'd like to hear what other people who might have experienced these public hearings are finding too. I'm finding that the abutters are much more restrained in their criticisms. And I think in part it's because they're sitting alone in their living room and it's, quiet and they just had a nice dinner or whatever. And they don't seem to be so strident. And I think in also in part, there's not a crowd for them to feed off. When in the traditional setting, somebody would say, and furthermore, there's already too much traffic out there. And everybody in the room would murmur and applaud. And, we don't have that. So I think that's helping to keep things at a bit of a more even keel.
I'd agree with that, Bob. We're finding that our presentations are definitely more focused as we're able to be on one project, and you might have an abutter or an interested party who would be logged in as well. But what I found was interesting last night in a presentation in the city of Portsmouth, it started at 6:30 and there were enough applications to keep them until 11. So they have the process cooked, so it's not a lot of lag time in between. And you're right, it took a number of months to kind of get that settled. But I was remarking at the number of property owners that are going forward with making changes in their properties, and that people are looking positively at their environment and that they're still moving forward with projects. And so in some ways the Zoom is easier because we can be at home or at our office and focused in right when our time comes, and not hanging out in many of the town halls that we have all hung out in for hours in advance and then the commute home. But again, on the positive, another positive side, I really find that people are doing this planning and asking us to do the planning. And so, there's more than just hope for when we get through this. People are really looking forward to moving beyond, and what does that feel like, and how do we make our environment better?
Greg,
On the construction side, Greg, when you're speccing and bidding a job, have you guys started building in longer lead times, or how are you accounting for delays in permitting, approvals, materials? Are you guys compensating for some of these new delays with project deadlines?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say compensating. It's really just articulating to the clients what the reality is, and working with people like Lisa and Boz and talking about that. What are you seeing? What do you have coming up in the plans? Hey, this might be a long lead time or maybe unavailable to get. And then just articulating that message. It all goes back to just that constant communication and setting clear and concise expectations with the clients. It's not so much delays, we're articulating what the true duration is so that there's a clear picture as to, okay, as we're going through this, everybody knows what the outcome is going to be. Of course, things will come up and we would articulate that, but mapping out the whole game plan and building it 10 times on paper and in theory before you actually put a shovel in the ground is the key.
And how are clients responding? Are you finding they understand? Obviously, they want their project when they want it. There's inherent delays which are of no fault of the construction. It's because of everything else we're talking about. Are you feeling that clients are receptive to it? They're understanding things may take a little bit longer?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. As long as the message has been articulated in advance, there's really nothing that they would be upset about. Yeah, we work with some pretty high-end clients and sophisticated clients. They understand they're in business as well and experiencing a lot of the same issues.
Good. So as we shift, we think about the building process itself, and as you think of kind of some of the areas we're talking about, we're kind of getting geared up for a project, some of the design, architecture, functionality on the outsides. As we start looking towards the interiors, obviously a big thing is obviously space. What's it look like for space for accommodating some type of social distancing, whether it's ongoing or at least for now. And then you're getting into the details of surfaces and really HVAC, right? I mean, we've got a heck of an experiment going on right now with municipalities, towns, cities, states, all doing something different for schools. And these schools vary in age as far as when they were built and what kind of amenities they have, if they have HVAC systems or not. So when we start thinking of either new construction or even redevelopments and updates, collectively, go ahead, anyone, what are you guys seeing in terms of those demands on, let's say HVAC systems or windows or anything that's going to try to provide these either redeveloped buildings or new construction buildings something that's a little more in line with the idea that, hey, if this ever happens again, we need to be more well prepared for it. What are you guys seeing in terms of that?
Yeah, we had Anthony, who was on the first half hour of our conversation, and he's a mechanical engineer, and I gotta imagine he is as busy as can be, consulting, looking at existing buildings. How do we analyze the existing mechanical system? It's interesting because one of the projects that we did a few years ago was a cigar bar in downtown Portsmouth, and they have a honking mechanical system. Their air exchanges every 4 minutes. And whether it's the users who are in there now who may not be as wary of being out and about, or the understanding that the air is exchanging that quickly, their business is doing well right now. And they've always advertised that the air exchange rate is good there because they want the cigar smoke to be, taken out of the space. But it's at the time, with what they needed to do, it was an extremely painful investment to the bottom line for the renovation. But from things that I've been reading now that talk about the mechanical systems and not only, offsetting kind of the costs of what they are compared to the quality for the end user. And as an owner of a company, the benefit that that brings to your employees, and how, you know, how that better quality in mechanical specifically brings to the users being in the buildings, maybe fewer sick days or just general quality of being inside. And then above and beyond that, are we going to design with higher ceilings so that we have more volume and allow more daylight in? And all of those things I think are going to be helpful in moving forward. And then an interesting point that Bob brought up about his earlier on about his exterior design and how to keep that 6-foot distance that we're all so conscious of now. Working with one of our interior designers in the company, we're laying out a grid pattern using carpet squares of 6x6 grids that are better than the circles, or, you know, thinking about these squares that everybody's putting on with tape, that can be a guide now, but as things change and maybe workspaces change again, just become a field of a pattern that maybe isn't so much in our forefront. So yeah, these are changes that I think are important for us now, but can bring value moving forward. And Greg, you certainly have experience with working with engineers and the installation of these mechanical systems as an example, and what we've been investigating for our clients to be bringing them and weighing the pros and cons, the cost, how much square footage it takes, the aesthetics.
Yeah, it's always a big evaluation, you know, on jobs. More often than not, your biggest costs are going to be in your mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. And I think understanding not only what guidelines are required, but doing a lot of listening and what's important to the end user, and then going to the experts, going to you know, the Anthony Grays and these mechanical engineers, and also talking to the reps for the manufacturers for Trane or Carrier, and what do your products provide us, and do a lot of listening. And what are the benefits? What's out there that maybe wasn't out there 2 years ago, or where are you going with it? What are going to be the future add-ons that we can say, this technology may not be available today, but this is coming, so you can prepare now and put these things in place so that it's an easier swap out when these new technologies, which will be coming as a result of this, are in fact readily available. I think really going to those experts, doing a lot of listening, and then articulating that to the clients as to, here's what we need to do now, but what's the long term? What does it look like 5 to 10 years down the road? And how can we do things now that will make it easier to transition to those new technologies that are in development down the road?
So a lot of emerging concepts, ideas, and planning. And on your side, Bob, I guess, and I'm kind of switching back to the exterior design as I'm thinking through this. Are in the exterior spaces, in public spaces, are you guys seeing a shift in planning differently, designing differently for those types of emerging technologies? Are you guys designing spaces thinking with that foresight that, hey, things, if they change again, you could easily manipulate whatever those public spaces are, or entrance ways, or, you know, if you guys are designing things that may have future changes, is that anything that's coming into to the concept now and in the fray now, or is it sort of, how are you guys handling that, looking at that emerging future?
It's very much right now problem. I'm thinking in particular, we're doing a sports complex, and you know, something as simple and basic as, you're going to need, at least in the short term, you're going to need more bleachers to seat the same number of people than you would have, you know, a year ago. So so that, you know, is maybe a starting point. And then we're also thinking about circulation, and maybe having a one-way circulation for, you know, crowds of people to come in and go out differently, and maybe having wider sidewalks and and, larger landing pads for the bleachers, for example, and then handling, the athlete circulation to and from the locker rooms. At the same time, while we're thinking about these things and engaging in conversations with our clients about them, we don't want to make the mistake of being too conservative and building for something that's ultimately not going to be needed, in a year or 6 months or 6 years for that matter. But striking that right balance between what's cost effective and relatively easy to implement that will have, a beneficial effect now, but at the same time not spending money for something that may turn out not to be necessary in the long run. So it's a balancing act. And what we're trying to do is find things like, for example, one-way pedestrian circulation sort of makes sense anyway. If it's something that you can build in, it's useful because more people can move faster. And if it's not costing extra money, it's certainly a good thing. So that's very much something that we're engaged in every day right now.
Yeah. So in my side of the world, raising equity for developments, of course we have asset specific, right? If it's a hotel, it's a hotel. If it's retail, it's retail. What I've seen is a shift more in and let's say differently too. January, February, getting into March, I was really ramping up with more projects than we could handle, and everything from all the hot topics now: hotels, assisted living, retail, office. And when really the pandemic really set in, call it late March into April, the projects that were further along are still kind of sustaining. The projects that were earlier in the cycle sort of went to sleep. So we've lost a lot to the pandemic in terms of just kind of wait and see. What we've seen with some of the projects that were moving forward, and this really relates to mixed use projects, is a real big shift in the development. What's happening at the project? What's the scope of the project? We went from, for example, we had a huge 2 million square foot mixed use, over 300 acre project that was a 50-50 blend of commercial and residential. And it's in Hyde Park, New York. So it's outside of the city, outside of Manhattan by about an hour and a half. And it was a great project for this 50-50 mix. And then just prior to the pandemic, someone started saying, what if it had a touch more residential? And it was just an idea. Once the pandemic became a reality, right? And there is a hotel that's being built now, and it had its challenges. But once the pandemic really settled in, it was brought to the attention, not by the developer, not by anyone on site, but really the town where this is. They came to the developer and said, would you consider more residential? And it started that conversation. So we crept it up from, the developer said, yeah, let's figure this out. And they kind of went from a 50-50 to, maybe a 55% residential. And the point is, this month now, September, we're getting reapproved for a minimum of 65% residential. And it's a real shift in that focus because of the demand, the urbanization. We've heard about, that's a new term, right? Or a more used term. So the urbanization and that need for residential and the demand for this residential, which is still going to play wonderfully in the project. It's just very interesting to see that shift. So where I'm going with this is once again, open to all of you. Maybe Greg, I'll start with you. Of course, if you have an asset-specific project, it is what it is. But are you seeing any shifts? Has anyone come to you and said, "Hey, we wanted to do this, but now we're going to change it"? Or are they shifting it from, "Hey, this was going to be office, now we want to retail"? And are you seeing that on the construction side? Are you guys getting involved in that?
Yeah, I think the industrial space and the warehouse distribution space is interesting. It's one of our really niche markets, and the Amazon effect, if you will, and the ability to get things shipped to your house and the need to have big storage facilities and logistical facilities is developer driven. And big industrial warehouses by nature are big, and then you have to be flexible to work with those developers as they work through the leasing process and engagement of tenants. So I'd say, yeah, that's changing. By nature, it's always changing. I think with the need and that growing industry, we're seeing a lot more of it just by sheer volume of those type of projects, and developers looking for clear height space and working with multiple tenants or potential tenants on the plans and lease rates. So yeah, we're seeing that shift greatly. For the specific projects, not as much. Most of the projects that we have going, that we have a mixed use facility up at White River Junction. It's 70 units, 5 stories. They're still pushing forward and working through who that bottom commercial space is going to be. So I think that's kind of the nature of some of those projects inherently.
Sure, and based on that, Greg, I'm thinking, like you said, warehousing, distributing, and really that Amazon effect. And you think about Amazon was its own animal prior to this, and now it's just, grown an extra leg as a result of all this. So, I mean, it is what it is. But do you see, Lisa, do you see anything in terms of interior designing, and I'm thinking of all these deliveries, right? You have, obviously, depending on what you're designing and what the application is, of course you have, maybe a front counter where someone's getting delivered, and then of course you have stuff out back. But are you guys seeing any kind of offshoot of this where people are saying, hey, we want an Amazon area or a drop-off area or just some kind of different postal or delivery? Are you seeing any shifts in the design regarding that kind of effect?
Yeah, we did actually pre-COVID for our multifamily residential. It's not just a little room with mailboxes. I mean, there are delivery rooms, where boxes are being put. And we were finding it because of certain times of the year. At that time, it was, okay, Christmas is coming and we're getting a ton of deliveries. So as a matter of course now in our multifamily residential, we're including those larger spaces for those deliveries to be accepted. So yeah, it's really kind of a matter of course, and even now where you may not be delivering to somebody's front door in an apartment building or a condo building. You're delivering to an area where someone is accepting and signing in.
And Bob, what are you seeing on that, Bob? I'm sorry, Lisa. What are you seeing on that, Bob?
Well, we're seeing the same trend that you were discussing about your New York project. We're seeing locally where these projects, these large mixed-use projects that are going on in the state, as you know, there's in the state of New Hampshire, there's at least 3 fairly large ones, and all 3 are walking away from the commercial retail component and by default, if nothing else, moving to a higher density of residential. And I expect this trend is going to continue. And this trend is not necessarily pandemic related. It's also due to the changing nature of the retail world, and now maybe more pandemic related, the changing nature of the office world. Because I, for one, think that, now that so many people have said, hey, working from home isn't all that bad, whether their bosses agree at this point or not is another question. But, from a personal level, people are going to be looking for that, expecting that in a new job, and even in the job they already have. And that means it's just going to be a lower demand for office space. And, a mixed-use project that had fairly equal components before of retail, office, and residential is now finding that 2 of the legs of that stool are shrinking. And as a result, that residential piece is going to become more important, more significant. We're seeing it already. I expect planning into the future, we're going to see that. And maybe 10 years ago, we were seeing repurposing of industrial space into, commercial, mixed use, small shops, that sort of thing, or multi-tenant commercial. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that space going directly into residential without a commercial component. And we're going to see shopping centers doing the same thing. I'm, reading about this in other communities where, the old, Riches Plaza or what have you, that they've been struggling and getting very little rent for. They're coming forward with breaking that up into residential units and almost an interior mall sort of situation. And, I think that's going to be coming our way here.
At least Kurt and I were actually talking separately, I think probably a week or two ago, and talking about repurposing of buildings. And Lisa, you have quite a few, repurposing buildings, refacing buildings to accommodate different uses. It was interesting how much of that you had going on. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. During this time, for some of the office buildings that we have and clients that we have that have many office buildings, they're using this time to upgrade common areas. So while the buildings are quieter, it's time to upgrade the bathrooms. It's time to upgrade the foyers. We're doing a lot of renderings as facelifts, if you will, to some of these buildings to upgrade, and then that can be used as a tool to gain interest in vacant buildings. So it's been a lot of planning to get some of these things done and bringing these opportunities to some of the clients that we work with and say, okay, here's the time. Here's the time where you're not going to inconvenience as many people and your users, and you're not going to have to spend monies for night and weekend work. As Greg would say, that, there's the premium there. But if the building is empty and we can be making the best use of this time now, yeah, we've got some really interesting projects that have come forward because of that.
Right, and another idea, and I'm thinking kind of, Bob, on the direction you were going a little bit with what we think we're seeing in, future use of buildings and the demands on them. Tomorrow, is obviously just an unfortunate anniversary of September 11th. And, I've read a lot and seen a lot of conversation regarding the impacts to the commercial real estate industry, the demand on specifically office space as it pertained to the fallout after September 11th, right? And there was this sense of kind of fear and uncertainty of returning to office environments post 9/11. And it took about 18 months for that to recover or to kind of correct itself. And then we started seeing, the use of office space. And I think the trend right after that, not related, but really the trend sort of also started shifting to more of these offices with, open workspace, more of that collaborative work environment. And, you've read and you've seen different shifts and ebbs and flows and discussions on whether or not that was just a Google fad or, that everyone had to have a cool office, or if it was something that's actually productive. Where do you think, and this could just be pure opinion, and we can go around the horn if you like, and we're getting close towards the end here. So I was just thinking about it. But Bob, I'll start with you. What do you think in terms of the overall effect of the pandemic? Let's just pretend we think there's some recovery next year. Let's just pretend we think there's a sense of normalcy, whatever that may be. Let's pretend there's a sense of normalcy for starting next summer. Do you think we will still see a change in the demand of spaces? And it once again, it may not be even pandemic related, but as it relates to pandemic, do you think this is something that may be a little different ongoing, or do you think it'll be a kind of a shift and a change that might correct itself?
Well, that's a great question. And not having a crystal ball, but having some thoughts and thought quite a bit about what does this all mean in the long run. I do think that there will be a recovery from this pandemic, whether it's due to vaccines or just natural attrition. I do think we're going to see it become less of a health risk, and there'll be a return to normalcy. in large part from the old normal. In the near future, let's say within a year, maybe the 18 months it took after 9/11 is a good over-under estimate. So after that, though, I think there will be some lingering effects. And one is the idea of working from home. I think that's here to stay, and I think it's going to grow. And I think businesses, whether they like it or not, are going to have to learn how to handle that. They're being forced to do that now, in part because of the pandemic itself and people not feeling comfortable being around groups of people, but also the childcare issue. Schools haven't quite figured out how to handle, classroom learning yet. So a lot of our employees, and I'm sure we're not alone, are having not had made childcare alternative arrangements in the past, have no choice but to sort of swap schedules, work part-time, husbands and wives pitching in, and grandparents whenever they can and so forth. But it's all very improvised right now. And the point that I'm making is that this is forcing people to figure out how to work part-time and work remotely. And once they've figured that out and figure they can, get by income-wise, and they can, be just as productive as they were before, as far as possible, that's here to stay. So I think we're going to see more people shopping at home, more people working from home, which means that there's going to be less demand for those type of spaces remotely. I think in places, certainly in New England, outside of the major cities, I think we're going to see a continued influx, maybe an accelerating influx of housing demand of all types, single-family homes, multifamily living, because people are just going to feel more comfortable when they can go down and, buy a gallon of milk at the store and, not be in a crowded sidewalk and in a large crowded store. That this sort of suburban rural living that we have outside of the major New England cities offers. So I think that's going to be very strong. And we're going to see that cause increased pressure on housing of all types, large multifamily, mid-sized multifamily, and traditional subdivision, single-family homes.
Sure. Greg, what do you think?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Bob's saying. I think the way that we're approaching it, we're actually in the process of building out our new facility. We're moving because everybody's situation, every individual family situation is different. So we're flexible with our associates based on their individual needs. All we can control as a whole is providing our associates and our teammates the best possible workspace. So we're moving into a facility that's 3 times the size of our current facility. We've designed it in a way trying to keep some of those provisions in order for social distancing, a lot more hard offices as opposed to open area. But really all we can do is provide the best possible workspace at the office for our associates. And then from there, we have to be flexible on their individual needs. So, our business is based on our people, and that interaction and that human interaction is very critical to who we are as a company. So we're doubling down and saying we're going to go triple our space. We're growing, and we're going to provide a Class A office space for the people that work at Jewett in the office. So we're kind of going the other way, doubling down on the office, but providing more space, more facilities, while being flexible on an individual basis for our associates.
Right. And Lisa, final thoughts on potential future changes and anything else?
I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I just wanted to say, overarching, we're social beings. And I know with our team, we're just, looking forward to sitting around a table with markers and trays. Well, I still use markers and trays, and everybody else does things differently. But just to be collaborating again and around a table, whether it's the consultants that we might have here on the Zoom call, but there's we're finding, I believe that we will get through this. It will need to be together, whether it is at the office or at a church or at a restaurant. You know, we all thrive when we can respond and share with people. So I'm the optimist that we're going to get back to that. It will look different, I'm certain. And the question is, leading off of what you said, Dave, for how long? You know, God forbid there's another crisis that we have to deal with, and we'll learn from this one and move forward positively, I do.
Dave, you
Right.
want my 2 cents?
Absolutely, Rick. Take us
I think
home.
I think we're doomed. I think we got about 6 more months until the world ends. And
Fantastic.
no, but seriously, I do think that we're running. And this has amazed me that everyone that is in our industry and other industries have been able to adapt so quickly, and some industries have even become more efficient because of this. It's almost a forced thing for them because they had no choice. And personally, I find a lot of people working from home are becoming a little more efficient doing so.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there'll be a need for people to go into the office, but maybe not 5 days a week. And I also think that 9 to 5 job is a thing of the past. I think it's, you know, you work when you can, work when you want to, and it's becoming a little more efficient way of working, I think. Just my opinion, but but I do have a positive outlook on everything that's going on right now.
Excellent. Well, listen, in terms of our topic today, construction, design, engineering, adapting to the new normal, I'd like to thank the panelists. I think we had a productive conversation. I hope that the attendees thought so as well, and I appreciate your time and being invited to moderate. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, Rick.
And I want to thank you, Dave. I want to thank the panel, and I know everyone is probably standing and applauding right now because you all did a great job. I also want to thank all of our attendees, DeStefano Mogul Architects, Hinckley Allen, TF Moran, Allen and Major Associates, Northmark, EBI Consulting, and our yearly sponsor, US Pavement. I want to thank you all for joining us today and have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you, Rick.
Excellent.
Very
Thank
much,
you.
Dave.
Thank you all. Thanks, Bob.
Good to see you, Greg.
Lisa.
Take care.
See ya.
Thank you for watching today's interview. If you'd like to be a guest, a sponsor, or even advertise in the New England Real Estate Journal, you'll find our contact information in the description box below. You can also find all our social media platforms so you can follow us, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.